Hello everybody, thank you so much for stopping by and checking out another video here on Marksman Radio. So in the event of a nuclear explosion, there's basically two ways that people lose their lives. The most obvious one is the actual event or the explosion itself. The second and arguably more dangerous is what happens during the nuclear fallout. It's of course all the radiation and poisoning and sort of thing that ensues many months and even years afterwards that affect people's lives. Now, the same type of event happens even in non-nuclear explosions and sort of these catastrophic life-changing events like what we're seeing now with this pandemic. Obviously, we are going to have the initial blast, that's the initial loss of life, but following that is going to be the fallout, and that to me is going to come in the shape of drastic political and social changes. You already sort of see that we're seeing this happen now, and I'm concerned with the way it's headed. So I talked about this concept briefly over on my main channel at Marksman TV when I did a video about a month ago when this whole thing was sort of kicking off. And I likened it to 9/11, and basically what you have is this black swan event that sort of encapsulates everybody's attention. People get scared, they get paranoid, and they beg their governments to do something to make them safer. Back in the early 2000s, in 2001, we had 9/11 attacks, and then from that we get the Patriot Act, which is a complete abridgment of our rights and our rights to privacy. Of course, many people would say now that nobody wants the Patriot Act, and that's of course 20 years later in hindsight, everybody says, yeah, we don't want these policies to have taken place and nobody voted for these things, but in all actuality, we as Americans let it happen. The Patriot Act passed in overwhelming support, and actually a majority of those senators would go on to serve multiple terms. They were never voted out of office. And we as citizens can only vote our conscience. We can't go in there with guns and brute force and change policies or anything like that. And we as Americans failed to see any of those, people out of office. We failed to hold our representatives accountable for putting the Patriot Act in place. And in my opinion, that was because Americans as a whole were desperate to find ways to make America safer. We tend to forget that 20 years down the road, but that was the mentality that we were in. Now, globally, we're seeing a very similar sort of mentality. Of course, people are afraid with what's going on with this virus, and we are willing to not only let the government come in and make restrictions and different changes in our lives, but we are willing to make those changes ourselves. Now, some of those things come in such a minor way as, people wearing face masks and gloves everywhere they go. People are social distancing. We just had Mother's Day here, and of course, my family, we did get together, but in a very careful way, especially with the elder people in our family, to keep people apart and spaced out, as to reduce the risk of any sort of thing like this happening. But what happens when the social distancing and stuff like this becomes legislation? What happens when people start getting arrested because they don't choose to pay attention to those rules? We as members of the same society, should we approve of those measures to throw those people in jail? Say this woman in Texas who wanted to open up her nail salon. Should she have had the right to do that? And should her customers have had the right to come in and expose themselves to the higher risk of them being infected with this virus? Or should we as society choose to put her in prison because she is putting people at risk of them choosing to take themselves into her establishment? So that's a very fine line that we have to consider. Beyond that, we have a woman who is getting visits from police officers, I think in Wisconsin, because her child is playing with a neighbor's friend. And, of course, there's many videos that she has put out of the police making multiple visits to her home, being very rude and nasty and very condescending to her, and threatening to fine and even imprison her for allowing her child to play with a neighbor's kid during all of this. The risk here is, of course, many years after all of this is behind us, this virus really isn't a thing anymore. Will we have normalized police being able to come to our homes and saying where we can and cannot go because of public safety? Will we have legislation that dictates when we can and cannot open and operate our businesses because of health concerns? And remember, it might not just be this health concern that we enact these protocols. It could be a distant threat of terrorism. It could be a distant threat of some sort of immigration. It could be another virus. It could just be simple, a new strain of flu in the future. But when we as a society normalize the police ability or the government ability to step in and say, this is what you can and cannot do because of this virus, then we are, of course, leaving open the gates or Pandora's box for that to happen again in the future. Now, we talked about the slippery slope argument in the last video, and that same line of reasoning applies here. But of course, when it comes to legislation, logical reasoning tends to go out the door, and we do still have to be, if you allow a certain thing to happen, you have to be willing to accept all the potential outcomes that could come with that. You can't just say, I hope that they don't happen, or it's not intended for those things to happen, but they always could. Of course, when we're talking legislation, there's always people waiting for their opportunity to come forward and press their perspectives, their morals, their points of view on everybody else if they have the means and the excuses to do so. Okay, now the second branch of this, and in my opinion, the more concerning aspect of this whole thing, is what's happening on social media. Now, many people have made the argument that social media platforms like YouTube and Facebook and Twitter are the new public square. It is the place where people in this day and age come together to share their ideas, their expressions, stand up for the causes that they believe in. And what we are seeing more and more of is an oppression of those ideas, usually particularly on one side, and that's typically more the right-leaning conservative basis, Republican sort of basis or thought that seems to be suppressed. Now, a lot of people will make the argument that, hey, if you don't like it, if you don't want to be here, and if you don't like that sort of censorship, YouTube has the right to do that. Twitter has the right to do that. They are private businesses, and to a certain extent, I agree with that. But if you don't like it, go somewhere else, start your own platform. Now, that is not so simple, in my opinion. YouTube is a monopoly, so is Twitter and Facebook in their respective fields of social media. And monopolies are typically heavily restricted under the Sherman Act, and for some reason, YouTube not yet has been approached with those limitations. Maybe in the next 10 to 20 years they will. Also, it's not so easy to just because of that, move on to another platform. I have put videos up on BitChute for now 2 years with my Marksman TV content, and I think I have 120 subscribers there. Whereas on my YouTube channel, I have many multiples of that, over 50,000. With the same amount of time in uploading generally. The first day I even announced Marksman Radio, I got almost 1,000 subscribers, where again, I've been publishing the same content on BitChute with, 1/10 of that over the period of 2 years versus 1 day. So the audience is drastically different. Yes, everybody with a conservative idea or the people that have those belief systems can go to an alternate platform. But of course, the traffic over there is minuscule. Now their traffic can follow, but now you have a devised left-wing and a right-wing social media platform where the two ideas cannot intersect and challenge each other, which is, in my opinion, is very dangerous. Keep in mind the whole point of debate. If you're coming into a debate with someone, if you come into the debate knowing that you are right, no matter what the topic is, firearm ownership, abortion, it doesn't matter what it is, but if you come to that debate already believing that you know everything that is true about this debate, in my opinion, you've already lost. Debate is supposed to be the synthesis of ideas between two opposing forces so that both people can come together to a universal truth with a better understanding of the topic, having known each other's ideas and values. If you prohibit any opportunity for that to happen, whether you are a full left-wing or full right-wing advocate and you don't want to know what the other person says, basically what you end up with are the polar opposites moving further and further and further apart, whether you are an extremist left or an extremist right person, which in my opinion, extremist on either side is horrible. You allow those synthesizing of ideas, you bring people more towards a middle that people on both sides can be more tolerant or more capable of living with. Now, to that point, there is a YouTube channel that I really enjoy called Valuetainment. It's run by a guy named Patrick David, who is an entrepreneur. He runs a financial firm, and he does really interesting videos on entrepreneurship, and he does a lot of interviews with the world leaders and people who are leaders in their respective fields of business or whatever it is that they are into. Now, he did a really good interview with a woman named Dr. Judy Mikovits, who in all respects is a sort of counterbalance to Dr. Fauci, who we see on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News to some extent, who is the current voice to the virus pandemic that is going on right now. Now, Judy Mikovits takes a very opposite stance. In this sort of regard, you can't really call it left-wing or right-wing, but she takes an opposite or a polar opposite response to what Fauci has been saying. And her response is basically, I'm just going to summarize is that it's not as an intense pandemic that we are seeing. She has a lot of critical opinions of Dr. Fauci himself and what his personal motives might be for espousing all of this sort of diatribe around the virus that we are seeing. But anyway, on YouTube, a lot of her opinions and interviews are allowed to exist. But this particular one, which was on Valuetainment, had about 3 or 4 million views in the first 24 hours. It went viral. It was a really good interview, about an hour to an hour and a half long. And it really gave the platform to Judy Mikovits, Dr. Judy Mikovits, to express these opinions. Now, we as consumers of information, that's a really important thing to have, because we have Dr. Fauci's assessment, which is basically what the media is putting out, that this is terrible, the sky is falling, we need to do X, Y, Z, people are dying, which is important to listen to. I mean, it really is important to listen to that perspective, but also the opposite perspective of things are being blown out of proportion. We can, as rational human beings, take both perspectives, listen to both, and come together to a central truth, where one is extreme in one regard, which is the sky is falling, one is extreme in the other, which is, this isn't as bad as people are saying, and we can come together and have a more rational understanding of what the current situation might be. Now, unfortunately, YouTube decided to remove that video because it is giving bad medical advice. Now, this person is a doctor who's been practicing in her field for decades, so she definitely is an authority on what she's talking about. She just happens to have an unpopular opinion. And because of this, we are now only seeing this side of the argument. And as we only see this side of the argument, that is the direction that people are going to continue to go. And what you end up with is a general overreaction, in my opinion, to what's happening. Now, again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't take this seriously, and we should, but should we be taking it as seriously as we are? Are we potentially avoiding the economy, or we're addressing this in such a way that we could be providing or creating damage to our society and our economy that might not otherwise be necessary? We will never know, because voices on the alternative perspective or voices on the other side are being actively silenced. That's on Facebook too. That's not just Dr. Mikovits, that's also other doctors. There was a couple in California that voice their opinion on things that they are actually seeing on the front line. I have medical professionals who come into my store and they're telling me, listen, that we're not seeing as bad of an outcome as we thought we would. And maybe it's the social distancing is having an impact there. And again, I'm not trying to illustrate one point or the other. I'm not a medical professional, but what I am saying is we are not given all the information to get a full picture of what is going on to really make a rational judgment. Now, the negative aspect of this is the further we're pushed in one direction, the further fear it can create. I mean, we could be pushed in the direction of the sky is falling, which seems to be where we are, and we get societal collapse as a result. The infrastructure of society or the economy could really hurt because of that. Or we go too far in the other direction, which is don't do anything, and then people go out, they don't social distance, and people start losing their lives. So where is the happy medium? We will never know, because the two poles, one of them is removed, everybody's swinging left, and that's where we end up, really, on all social issues and debates. Now, it's not just this virus, and that's the point I'm trying to make, is if we continue to let this be the norm, to say, these ideas are prohibited because they are giving poor medical advice, okay? When can we start making that argument for other things? This idea cannot be presented because it is giving poor political advice. These ideas cannot be presented because they are giving poor educational advice. And who are the people ultimately who are in charge of saying what good medical advice is, what good educational advice is, what good political advice is? And that's the problem. You take away one leg of a chair, the whole thing will fall. And I'm afraid that that's going to happen. And in my opinion, that is the nuclear fallout that's going to come out of this. And we are already seeing it with the liberties that are already being taken away and the censorship that we are allowing to happen. Well, guys, that's all I really have to say about that. I hope you enjoyed listening to this video. If you did, please let me know by hitting that like button. Also, subscribe to my channel. If you are here from Marksman TV, my main channel from my store, I really appreciate it. If you want to see more firearm-related content, you can go do that over there. Thanks again, guys. I'm going to sign off. I hope you all had a wonderful Mother's Day. I know that this was a sort of a morbid topic for the day, but anyway, I wanted to get that out there. You all have a good day, and I'll see you next time.